What's up, guys? This is Harame Crossover. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was a Super Ninja Part 3. And if you did enjoy the video, give this video a like. And if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions with a twist. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 3. After an unwelcome and forced nap, a pair of dark eyes awakened. Satsuki Uchiha's eyes belonged to her, who had been put to sleep without her permission by her own mother, Makoto Uchiha. When her eyes adjusted, she saw she was lying down on a sofa inside a room. She raised her back and proceeded to examine her surroundings, discovering that the room she had been assigned to was strange. "This isn't my home," she pointed out. Because her room was attached to the balcony, she observed two things. First, she was on the second story of someone else's home. Second, the moon is visible, indicating that it is now dark. It took her another second to clear her head and recollect what had caused her unconsciousness in the first place. Mom. Her mother's eyes changed before she was struck out cold by something she couldn't see but could feel. It was as though something had been disturbed with inside her, genjutsu. She inquired sarcastically, knowing she was under a spell that had driven her to sleep. Tampering with one's chakra circulation may accomplish that, she had to concede. The questions she wanted to ask and urgently desired answers to were, what made her do it, and where has she taken me? She rose up slowly, separating herself from the sofa. She then moved towards the entrance leading to the house's internal hallway. She cautiously opened it, and when it was barely open, she peered inside to check if anybody was there. When she saw it was empty, she exited the room and softly shut the door. She then heard noises from below. A woman's, an elderly man's, and a younger man's voices are heard. Voices she recognized as she concentrated her hearing to listen in on their discussion. "So that's it? We're just going to let this happen? Is there no other way to solve this problem but this? Naruto. Not after 8 years of animosity, Naruto. The mission is currently underway. He should be finished in a couple of hours or so. He's very talented, after all. Who is the Hokage? What exactly is he doing? And what is he on about? I suppose I came forward too late then. That if I had done this a long time ago instead of now, the clan and Konoha might have been able to have a civil conversation to work things out? Mom? The family? What exactly is going on here? Perhaps. But we can't know for sure right now, and it doesn't matter in the current order of things," the Hokage remarked. "All we can do now is wait." Old man, did you at least try to solve this problem peacefully before it got to the point where it couldn't be repaired? If so, what caused them to fail? Differences in our philosophy, Hiruzen said. I stood for what one of my sensei said, that we can all live peacefully in harmony through understanding, but most of the people I work for adopted my sensei's brother's way of thinking. Which is it? Naruto inquired. Vigilance is essential, Hiruzen said, and most of my peers took that way of thinking and instilled it within their very soul. Instead of faith, they could only trust someone who could be trusted, and even then, they gave their trust cautiously. While such pragmatic reasoning is acceptable, it didn't help matters with the Uchiha clan. What? Needless to say, I failed to persuade them, Hiruzen said as Satsuki felt a crawling sensation in her gut. And now we're all here. I didn't even inform Homura, Kaharu, or anybody else about your bargain with me, Makoto-san, and I'm afraid they won't bother hearing you out before making a decision. I'm grateful, Makoto remarked, but exploiting my kid, was it your concept? Satsuki's breath caught, and the creeping sensation intensified. No, it belonged to Danzo. He and I both understood that Itachi had no pride in his tribe and that he was more devoted to the village and wanted to be a part of it than he did to his clan. While the thought of him doing such a horrific thing disgusts me, I could see the advantages as well, so I agreed. I'd always suspected Itachi wasn't like the other guys in our clan. As you said, he had no pride in his own clan, and I knew that this would cause his priority and the clan's priority to conflict one day. But, for it to come to this, what will happen tonight might be attributed to a variety of factors. One of them was the choice to separate your clan from the rest as a result of what occurred 8 years ago. But none of it matters right now. And what about Itachi? Will you be able to accept his future reputation while knowing the truth about what occurred? I'll do my best. As long as Satsuki is still alive and well, it would suffice. There was a brief pause until Hiruzen eventually broke the stillness. Naruto, what's wrong? There was no response, just the sound of someone creeping closer to her position, which made Satsuki's eyes widen, as if Naruto was aware of her presence and had been listening in on their talk. Her concern was confirmed when he unexpectedly appeared, stared at her, and after a minute of awkward quiet, she lamely muttered, hi? Hey. You got up early, didn't you? Yeah, She came to a halt. Wait. You knew what became of me? Yes, Naruto said with a sigh. Did you hear what we were saying? He replied, his tone indicating that he was not accusing her of anything wrong. Instead, it was a more tired, yes. What's happening on, Naruto? Satsuki inquired, pleading for the truth. Shall we go downstairs? We'll go through everything. And so she followed Naruto, her instincts screaming at her that something was terribly wrong, that whatever they were talking about concerned Itachi, the Uchiha clan as a whole, and she was beginning to realize that her assumption that there was a conspiracy looming over everything was correct after all. Makoto's eyes widened as she spotted Satsuki enter the living room. Satsuki, you've woken up. Satsuki, sit yourself, Naruto murmured, motioning to the sofa. This will need some explanation. Naruto, Mom. What exactly is going on? What's the problem? What exactly do you mean? Is this connected to Itachi ni? She fired forth a slew of queries, fearful that they would provide the worst responses conceivable. Please, Satsuki. Just sit, Makoto inquired. Please, relax. Please have a seat. Satsuki reluctantly did so, and Naruto sat next her, before Hiruzen murmured, Satsuki. Before we start, we want you to hear us all the way through. It's okay if you want to pass judgment on us. But first, listen to us. Understand? After a few seconds of stillness, she nodded slowly and said, oh okay. Naruto already figured this out. Hiruzen groaned before saying, but first, let's go back to the Kyuubi event 8 years ago, where the stated Biju was responsible for the death of the 4th Hokage. Fugaku stood still in front of a pretty intimidating figure, his eyes conveying neither fear, worry, or fury. His look was one of knowing, as if he was not startled or astonished, despite the fact that he was covered in blood and his sword was unsheathed. So you've finally arrived, Fugaku said. Did you save me for last? Yes, the figure said. It's only logical to cut the branches before going to the root to ensure that the coup dies out completely. The majority of those who are unstable were the first to die. Good, Fugaku said, tilting his head down. At the very least, you ensure that those who joined the movement out of a mindless desire for battle and glory are eliminated. Even I see now that allowing them to join was a mistake. Indeed, the person answered, but I understand why you let them. You were in a difficult situation. Your options are restricted. Your resources are limited. And the majority of your soldiers were. I, for want of a better phrase, disagreed with your point of view. They don't really get why you struggle, why you resist. Only a few people understood what you were saying. Even so, they were insufficient. HMPH. Itachi, are you lecturing your father? You? Fugaku inquired. Who else except me had murdered practically everyone in here? You. Also, mother. Itachi corrected him, the latter two are. Satsuki. Out of the picture. The Hokage possesses. I was told not to murder them. So I was right. Fugaku murmured, disheartened. Makoto had made some kind of agreement with him. Do you know about this, father? I had assumed as much. I became suspicious after waiting so long for them to return home and they never did. I was going to go search for them to verify whether my suspicions were correct. Until you showed up. I was prevented from doing so. If so, then please forgive me for not allowing you to see any of them one more time, Itachi stated. Fugaku's son then attacked, intending to murder his father. But Fugaku summoned his Sharingan in a split second and avoided the blade. He then attempted to punch Itachi in the face with his elbow, but Itachi had activated his Sharingan as well, enabling him to shift his head sideways. Before Itachi's sideward slice could completely cut Fugaku's midsection, he leapt back several steps, never breaking his gaze off his errant son until he stopped. You made one mistake, Itachi, Fugaku stated. With the art of assassination, you could have killed them all, but you opted to engage in close battle with me, so don't worry. I'm not going down without a fight. I am still a Uchiha, even if I am opposed against my own kid. I will fight until the end. You are commendable, father, Itachi replied, slightly pleased, but you are unarmed. I've snipped you, and you are unaware that I have a competitive edge over you. I've kept it hidden from everyone, even you. You're postponing the inevitable, father. Please, he said, his eyes softening slightly. Do not put off my goal, father. That's a fancy way of saying, don't force me to do this, son, Fugaku said, but I'll still fight. Regardless of what you say. Do you understand why? Fugaku then did multiple hand seals before proclaiming, because I am a Uchiha, and I'm proud to be the clan's leader. The father and son then clashed. Wah. What? Hearing that your whole clan was plotting a coup against the hamlet where you lived was not a pleasant experience for Satsuki or anybody else. Makoto and the Hokage had told her everything about the coup, its inception, the rationale for its creation, the clan's hostility against the village's leadership, and the method that the Hokage and his peers had developed to fix it. And it was no better than the last disclosure of the coup, if not more horrifying and awful. So it was no surprise that she was troubled and appalled by the finale. Itachi ni. No. Itachi ni, you can't. He's not capable of doing so, he isn't. He's not that kind of guy. Makoto and Hiruzen were quiet, with their heads inclined slightly downwards, since they didn't know what to say now that she understood what was going on and what would happen next. I don't like this either, Satsuki, Naruto said. And I know they're not happy either, he said, extending his hand to Makoto and Hiruzen. I hate this. I despise being unable to do anything that might help people who earned it. With all I had, I just couldn't rescue any more of those who deserved to be saved inside your clan. Naruto, dear. Makoto whispered soothingly, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault, it's ours. We are too proud, too adamant about our cause. We're now paying the price. Every one of us, she replied, devastated by recent occurrences. No, this is silly. What is this? A horrible dream? A nightmare? If so, please, wake me up, anyone, please. Satsuki was taking it hard. No, this is absurd. What is this? A bad dream? A nightmare? If so, please, wake me up, anyone, please. Her pupils shrank, her complexion became pale, her breath became ragged, and she began to sweat excessively as the discovery became too much for her to bear. She put her hands on the front of her head, covering the top portion of her face. This isn't going to happen. Makoto, Hiruzen, and Naruto turned to Satsuki, who was becoming more unstable over time, and said, Satsuki? Makoto inquired. Satsuki's symptoms flared up again a split second after she didn't even hear her mother's call. Purple-colored, plasmic-like energy started to emanate from her body, but she didn't appear to notice, continuing to scream, this isn't happening. No way, this isn't happening, it can't happen. The other three people in the room were all taken aback by what they were seeing, Satsuki. Makoto exclaimed, stunned by what she was witnessing. Her daughter, Satsuki, displaying something she had never seen before. Satsuki. What's the matter with you? Are you okay? Then, as she worriedly inquired, she moved to touch her shoulder. That was a huge error. Her brows narrowed since she didn't want anybody to attempt to soothe her in her present condition. Don't touch me. When she swatted her mother's hand away and stretched her palm towards her, the purple energy created a projectile that would strike her squarely in the stomach and lethally hurt her. Which is what would have occurred if Naruto hadn't been present. The energy would have sent her flying several feet and crashing into the wall behind her, but Naruto's skin was considerably more robust than the average human's. It barely took a second and a half for him to respond by rushing, stopping in front of Makoto, and then extending his hand to deflect the energy missile. He blocked it as if it were a normal ball tossed to him. However, the after effect was unexpected. It caused a kinetic wave that shook everyone and everything in the room, causing Makoto and Hiruzen to be flung several feet back from where they stood, and the nearby items to fall, shift, or tilt from their original position. Only Naruto and Satsuki survived, the latter because a protective bubble grew around her body and shielded her when it occurred, and the former because of his amazing endurance and sense of balance. No, she thought as she stared down at her hands. Oh, I'm so sorry, that wasn't the case. She was gripped by terror as she saw her mother behind Naruto, gazing at her with what seemed to be fear in her eyes, worry that she had led her mother to be terrified of her because of what she had just done. No. She faltered at first, taking a few steps backwards away from them, and then she turned away from the others and sprinted for the door. There was a startled pause, and Naruto's mouth opened slightly. That's not a regular jutsu, was it? It's something else, could she be? Before he could complete that idea, he became aware of his surroundings, and the first thing he did was check on Makoto and Hiruzen. First, a woman's well-being should be verified, so she walked to Makoto and inquired, "Are you okay? Is there something wrong with you?" After looking at the location where Satsuki had stood for a minute, she eventually allowed her gaze to shift to Naruto. I'm perfectly fine. Thank you, I wasn't that wounded." "Are you able to stand?" "Yes," Makoto said, nodding. "Naruto-kun, I'm perfectly alright. Check in on the Hokage. He may need more medical treatment than I do." Hearing her remarks, Naruto instantly hurried to the fallen Hiruzen and said, "Old man, are you alright?" "HNGK," grumbled Hiruzen. "I'm not certain. Perhaps some bones were broken. After all, I'm an old guy, and these old bones aren't as strong as they once were," he said cynically. "Well, can you stand up?" said the elderly man, and Naruto just shook his head. It took some effort on his side, but after a few seconds of grunting in agony and Naruto's aid, Hiruzen was able to pull his back up. "Well, even if it's not as wonderful as it once was, this body still has some power." "Well, good," Naruto sighed, "but what Satsuki did, that wasn't a jutsu of any kind, was it?" "That was it. A manifestation of energy. It is probable that she is." He trailed off, smiling at the prospect of not being the only youngster with abilities that set him apart, especially when compared to a shinobi. But then he saw how terrified she was, how traumatized she was, knowing she was unwittingly harming her mother because she couldn't control it. She didn't have the luxury of finding out her power's offensive capabilities via some way that didn't harm anybody else. Unlike her, he was in his right mind when he resolved to discover out the extent of his power, and as a result, he had taken some safeguards. Knowing this, Naruto had an idea of how afraid, confused, and befuddled Satsuki felt right now. "Naruto-kun," Makoto asked as she gently lifted herself. "What is the situation with Satsuki? What was that purple energy?" Hiruzen then chimed in, "Naruto. She may be someone like you. Someone who is capable of performing things that even I don't believe are conceivable." "Do you mean there are other people like me?" Naruto inquired. "Two of them, if Satsuki was truly different like you," Hiruzen stated before grunting in agony and lifting himself up. After a while, he looked to Makoto and added, "You don't seem to know about this beforehand, Makoto-san." "No, I do not," Makoto said. "I had no idea Satsuki could do that." "What was it?" "If my guess is correct," Naruto began, "I believe that was her one-of-a-kind power. Some kind of. She could convert her chakra into a malleable energy field that could be both destructive and protective." He glanced at the palm of his right hand that he had used to deflect the energy projectile. The skin was still a touch red owing to how strong it was. "Fascinating," Hiruzen whispered, "so each of you is unique, Naruto." "Even if I don't completely understand this," Makoto replied, focused on the more pressing issue at hand, "I'm more concerned about my daughter's whereabouts. What is her destination?" "Minutes ago. When Satsuki left the Hokage's mansion, she was at a loss for what to do. She had harmed her mother, and her scared face as she looked at her, she didn't take it well. Her mind, whirling from the recent discovery of her tribe and what she had just done, albeit unwillingly, had commanded her to leave the premises as soon as possible. But now that she was free, she wasn't sure what she should do next. She did know, however, that she did not dare to return inside, fearing the reaction of her mother, the Hokage, and, most importantly, Naruto. But he just stopped it with his hand. "Is he strange, like me?" she questioned. Before she could think about it any further, her line of thought was stopped by a recollection of her brother, specifically what he had purportedly been told to do. She didn't want to think of her clan being murdered by one of their own members, her brother. And, with her mental state in shambles, her rational mind was inhibited, so she did the most logical thing she could think of at the time. She dashed towards the Uchiha neighborhood, determined to prove that what she had been taught was false. Meanwhile, despite his father's disability, Itachi discovered that he was a formidable warrior. Even though he was unarmed, their struggle helped him understand that Fugaku rose to leadership of the Uchiha not just through political maneuvering, but also through martial skill and strategic thought. Itachi had seen the latter when his father was able to form and sustain the rebel organization with little public notice and meager finances. Despite the fact that he had to resort to certain dubious actions and approaches out of desperation, his performance was excellent. They were only discovered owing of the village's suspicions about the Uchiha's devotion, and they were completely unaware of it. Until they were all slaughtered one by one. Meanwhile, Itachi had previously received a taste of Fugaku's martial prowess via several sparring sessions when he was younger. Fugaku, on the other hand, attacking him with the aim to murder was a completely other situation. Fugaku's assault on him was not motivated by desperation. However, thanks to his final stand as the targeted Uchiha survived. His wife had deceived him and taken their daughter with her, and his son had slaughtered the rest of his clansmen, so he didn't have much to live for. If he had already been sentenced to death, he would at the very least resist. To the last end, he remained defiant. And he stood tall till the bitter end. Until Itachi pressed his blade on his stomach. Until he felt his own blood pouring from his mouth, flowing down from his lips into his chin and dripping onto the floor. After Itachi stabbed him, his son drew his sword as quickly as he stabbed him. Despite the stress of being pierced by a particularly sharp instrument, Fugaku held his stand by sheer force of will. He remained quiet, his eyes unfocused, as if he was attempting to prolong his stay in the realm of the living, even if only for a second. He examined the site of his wound before turning to face Itachi. He then opened his lips to say something, however, all that came out were strained gasps. He then closed his lips, swallowed, uncomfortably, and attempted to speak. But before he could say anything, he collapsed. He first went to his knees and attempted to stay there, but as his life force began to leave his body, he discovered, vaguely, that he was no longer able to direct his body to move as he desired. Finally, he collapsed on his stomach, unable to say anything further. Itachi glanced at his father's body, at the tremendous quantity of blood streaming from his wound, at the eyes that were now lifeless. And there were no emotions visible on Itachi's face as he saw the image, because once he was given an aim, no matter how morally repugnant it was, as long as it provided a type of advantage that may persist for years, he would execute it. Emotion was a familiar idea to him, being a human and all, but Itachi had been trained to calm, if not suppress, many of those feelings. And that was just one of the many things he was really good at. Though, he had to confess that he still felt the pull in his figurative heart, as he slaughtered them all. He just decided to quell it and then disregard it completely. Nonetheless, he chose to keep a silent watch for a few moments. His assignment was complete, therefore he could at least undertake this little task, for his father, as well as his clansmen. He realized that it was difficult to defend what he had done. He was well aware that he had made a mistake. Something disgusting. But he hoped that someone who understood the events that led up to this occurrence would recognize that the line between right and wrong was blurred. Commit genocide to avert a larger-scale conflict. The weight of human lives at risk in keeping peace was heavier than the hurt pride of a few hundred, like a balancing scale that would shift in favor of the bigger, heavier thing. Perhaps, if the specifics of his conduct and what preceding it were known, it might be regarded as a necessary step. There would undoubtedly be discussions on the moral implications of this incident, but that didn't matter just now. What has been done is done. Let people assess him based on what they know, however little that may be. So now, it was finally time for him to go. However, as it happens, the time he took for vigil was the time it took for his sister to arrive and witness him gripping the sword that killed their father, his blood still staining the steel of his blade. It was an experience that Itachi and Satsuki will remember for the rest of their lives. How could you? After witnessing what her brother had done, it was the only thing she could ask him. When she arrived at the Uchiha area, she was taken aback by how rundown, deserted, and abandoned everything seemed, despite the vibrancy she had seen only yesterday, even at night. It was as though she had stumbled into a deserted town. A strange, terrifying area that sent shivers down her spine simply by going inside it. The most unsettling aspect was that this was not an unknown location. Its familiarity was unsettling to Satsuki because it seemed strange, seeing the area after hearing what had to be the most horrible thing her mother had ever spoken to her. Even if there were no dead corpses laying about, no trail of blood, the district's calm neighborhood was made scarier by what she dreaded to be the reality. And now she realized that her terror wasn't simply a figment of her imagination, it was true. "It is a necessary measure, Satsuki," replied her brother, his face devoid of emotion, simply a frigid look directed at her, a glare created by his Sharingan, which was now altering, changing, and evolving. "I'm not sure who told you, but I hope you understand why I had to do this someday." Though Satsuki noticed the Sharingan's altered form, she disliked it. All she cared about was that her brother had shown a part of himself to her that he had never exhibited before. The side that allowed him to murder their father and clansmen with no guilt reflected in his countenance. "Mom told me, and the Hokage," Satsuki continued, I thought it was a lie. That you won't be able to do this. That you can't. because you aren't this kind of person. You're a good dude, buddy. It was always. However, this. How? How could you murder them all and have no remorse? She inquired. Because it is my mission, Itachi said, and I know how horrible this is, Satsuki. But I've come to terms with it. You may judge me whatever you want. You are free to despise me and knock me off my perch. If you believe that what I did cannot be justified for whatever reason, then so be it. Satsuki had no notion of his devotion to his ideal, the belief that peace is something worth dying for, and she had no idea how far he would go to uphold that ideal. As a result, she was humiliated, but also enraged. I can't believe you. Itachi groaned and walked away from her, intending to depart without saying anything further. He was ready to exit out the back door to conduct a shunshin. But before he could get there, Satsuki's screams and following singing halted him. Brother, you must not leave. He turned to find Satsuki surrounded by a purple-colored energy sphere that shimmered about her, his eyes widening at what he could only think was some bizarre manifestation of her chakra. Satsuki, I'm talking about you. This time, she was too furious to see the purple plasmic energy, too disappointed in her brother's indifference to what he'd done, and too heartbroken by the ruin of her brother's image that she had carried for so long to care. Her eyes widened, her fists clenched, and she seemed to be furious for both her brother and herself, the former for what he'd done, and the latter for her inability to truly despise her brother after hearing the explanation from her mother and the Hokage. He was only carrying out an order, one that would avoid a worse disaster. These lines, along with numerous others with similar meanings, kept ringing within her thoughts. She couldn't bring herself to hate her brother, no matter how hard she tried, especially now that she knew why. The sound of the front door opening quickly caused them to turn, and there was Naruto, who distracted Satsuki for a time, which proved to be enough for Itachi to depart. He barely gained a second, if not 2 seconds, head start, as Satsuki instantly rushed to catch up to him. Satsuki was halted by Naruto, who abruptly appeared in front of her in the space of a second. No. Let him go, Satsuki, he urged to her. Get the hell out of my way, Naruto, she exclaimed, her energy field flashing in reaction to her rage, and then attempted to shove him out of the path, but he wouldn't budge no matter how hard she pushed him. No, let it go, Satsuki. What are you planning to do once you finally get up to him? What do you intend to say? He inquired. That is my concern. Naruto, get out of my path or else, she replied as she extended her hand, attempting to frighten him away with her energy field. However, she mistakenly formed an energy beam that propelled him several feet away while also causing a catastrophic ripple effect owing to how it reacted with the air around it. She was appalled by what she had done without her own consent. She had once again wounded someone, but this time she knew she was doing it on purpose, unlike previously. Satsuki, who was still not as clear-headed and sensible as she would have liked, chose to keep racing after her brother, reasoning that the fact that he had brushed off her energy projectile previously would enable him to withstand this one just as easily. She ran after him as quickly as she could, and she did find him, standing on the street right outside their home, lit up by the full moon behind him, as if waiting for her to arrive. What did you say, little sister? That bright, wispy energy? Itachi inquired, as if really interested. I don't know, Satsuki acknowledged. It's a sign of I've been keeping it hidden from everyone, including our parents. I see, Itachi remarked, but why do you keep chasing me, Satsuki? What do you want to gain from this? Deep down within, Satsuki understood there was nothing she could gain by continuously pursuing him, nothing she could do about what had occurred, since everything he did was on instructions that would never see the light of day. What would the act of pursuing her brother accomplish? Knowing that he agreed, and perhaps more tragically, volunteered to do this horrific deed, all in the name of keeping the peace. But maybe there was something she truly wanted to do, something she could do. I want to see your regret, Satsuki stated, her determination rekindled. Wait, what did you say? I want to see your remorse, Satsuki stated again, this time more firmly. I want you to show me an expression that shows what you truly feel inside. Itachi ni, I recognize you. Is that the brother I know? He will not do this and then feel nothing. He is not a callous person. Itachi blinked twice, the only indication that he could and did feel anything, and even then, it was extremely hazy of him. The brother you know is nothing more than a lie, Satsuki, Itachi remarked, his tone calm and cool yet somehow weird to hear. This is the genuine. Cut that nonsense, Itachi ni. I'm going to make you show me your regret, Satsuki shouted, this time more enraged, even if you don't want to demonstrate it. Satsuki then extended her palm and, using her determination, generated an energy missile that she directed towards her brother. Soon after, there was an explosion, not huge enough to demolish the whole structure, but powerful enough to kill a typical man and everyone standing nearby. She assumed that her brother had evaded the projectile before it could touch him, that he had utilized his quickness to dodge her energy blast, and that he would be gone when the smoke cleared. But when it did, she was even more surprised by what she saw. Her brother was still there, unyielding and expressionless as before. But he had extended her arm just before the energy projectile struck him, and he had constructed a similar energy field that surrounded his whole body, with a segment of it shaped like a shield hovering in front of him. Satsuki was taken aback by what she'd just seen, and her brain could hardly grasp what was going on. Itachi then turned off the energy barrier and remarked, carelessly, "Do not chase me, Satsuki. You're not powerful enough." Itachi's Sharingan had changed form, and the three Tomo collected in a circle that followed each of his pupils had vanished, replaced by a sinister-looking three-pronged shuriken-like pupils. How? Let's just say you're not the only Uchiha who has had Stranga symptoms like this before, Itachi stated before turning his back and saying, "I'll say it again, do not. Please follow me, Satsuki." He then turned his head to face her frightening stare and replied, "You are not ready." Satsuki was stunned dumbfounded by Itachi's demonstration, and she couldn't even think of a good answer. "If you are so eager to achieve what you so wish, then the next time we meet, if we ever do, I hope you have the fortitude to confront me. Anything less would be suicidal for you." Itachi then vanished with his shunshin, leaving Satsuki to look at the spot where he had stood only a second before. Her brother was similar to her in that he could generate an energy field with the same attributes as she could, but he utilized it considerably more expertly, considering how he could form a construct out of it. "Satsuki." The sound of her mother's voice from behind jolted her out of her daydream, and she turned to face her mother, who seemed fatigued from doing something before she came. "Mom." The sound of the door leading to the inside of her home being opened from the inside distracted the mother and daughter's attention. And they spotted Naruto, who looked considerably worse for wear, given his clothing was now in shreds, but otherwise, he was good, except for some inflamed skin here and there, but they are gradually improving. "That," Naruto said cynically, "not that I wouldn't heal, but never mind. Do you have a clearer mentality now, Satsuki?" It was, in fact, clearer, and she didn't dare to look him in the eyes since, in her rage, she had harmed Naruto in order to satiate her blind fury, which had led her to the brink of insanity. Noticing this, Naruto approached and said, "Look, I don't blame you, okay? You were enraged, perplexed, and even vindictive. I understand why you reacted the way you did. Physically, I'm a little sore, but otherwise, I'm good. In fact, I'm already on the mend. See?" He tried to reassure her with a more upbeat tone. "I'm sorry," Satsuki muttered, tilting her head down, seeing his effort to lighten the situation, but she couldn't forgive herself for what she'd done. "Look, neither me nor your mother blamed you for inadvertently hurting us," Naruto remarked. "We recognize that you have no control over it. We don't, Makoto-san." "Yes," Makoto said in response. "We do. I'm not mad with you, and I'm not mad about what you did. You had no intention of causing us harm, right? So don't be concerned." "But," Satsuki continued, gathering her courage to gaze at Naruto, "I did purposefully injure you. Come on, don't beat yourself up over it," Naruto murmured as he approached her shoulder. "I'm not mad at you. If I'm not, you shouldn't be so harsh on yourself." Satsuki was relieved, but it didn't alter the fact that she had assaulted Naruto in a fit of rage, and so she couldn't give him a smile or anything to say. "We're here with you, Satsuki," her mother said as she felt another hand holding her other shoulder. "And I must also apologize, because of what I did." Makoto had berated herself for selecting the shortest, quickest route to bring Satsuki to safety while performing genjutsu on her own kid. "I'm sorry," Makoto continued, "I just thought that I did what was best. That putting you to sleep so you may be safely transported would be the greatest course of action." Satsuki felt deceived, but she knew her mother was simply worried sick about her, so she did what she thought was best. "It's okay, mother," Satsuki whispered quietly. Part of her was saying the truth, but half of her was not. Makoto realized it, so she could only smile regretfully as she held her daughter, grieving the whole time. Her daughter returned the embrace, and the mother and her kid, two of the world's last Uchiha, grieved as they stood in the midst of their district, which was now filled with the bodies of their fellow clansmen. Naruto frowned as he crossed his arms, watching the scene from a few feet away after taking a few steps back to allow them have this time to themselves. Is it all worth it in the end? Perhaps. Perhaps. These were the only acceptable replies to that question, since there are no absolute right or incorrect answers in this situation. There are simply personal opinions, and, according to Naruto, the whole carnage was the result of the opposing factions' obstinacy. He couldn't think of anything that might redeem this act in his eyes, but he recognized that it was the only feasible choice remaining if the village's stability was to be maintained. That doesn't mean I have to like it. There was a reason Naruto arrived late, despite having better speed to the Hokage or Mikoto and knowing exactly where she would go when Mikoto posed the question. The kinetic blowback that Satsuki had generated harmed the elderly man more than Naruto had anticipated, especially because Naruto regarded Hiruzen's health to be so critical that he took it upon himself to transport him to the hospital. Then there was the unexpected surge of shinobis that arrived just as Naruto decided to fly him over to the hospital. Hiruzen apparently instructed the shinobis entrusted with patrolling the Hokage home to take the day off, but their sense of duty compelled them to act when they were notified that there was a surge of energy emanating from the inside of the mansion. It took more than a few minutes to reassure them that nothing was wrong, and then his advisors, Homura and Koharu, strolled into the mansion with only a hint of concern on their faces and more of a, "I knew this would happen one way or another, sooner or later," kind of expression. Then things became a lot more complicated, with a lot of arguing, screaming, frustrations, and, most importantly, lost time. However, Hiruzen was eventually taken to the hospital, followed by Homura and Koharu, and his old teammates turned advisors were there to chastise him for not alerting them of his arrangement with Mikoto. "I might have taken a gamble when I chose not to tell you of what I had chosen to do," he said, "but I'm not calculating my chances of winning blindly, nor am I going to the worst-case scenario without first attempting to settle things calmly. Unlike you two, who could only see the bad in other people instead of seeing their inherent goodness and wanting to go the extra mile to find a peaceful solution, I won't hear any of it, least of all from you two, who had abandoned the ideals that Hashirama-sensei had taught us and adopted the skewed ideals of Tobirama-sensei. Even he, despite his actions as Hokage to confine and supervise the Uchiha, believed in the inherent goodness of every man until his death, even for the Uchiha. Or have you two forgotten Shisui's father, Kagami, in whom he put his trust?" Knowing Hiruzen's tenacity, they opted to shift the subject, though they did take notes on what he had stated for future reference. They then proceeded to discuss something they had discussed many days before. Hiruzen intended to form a new gang of some kind when an Anbu appeared to him, displaying abilities that no other shinobi had, as well as the reveal of Naruto. "It's not a very convincing idea," Koharu said, sighing. "Though we know what she's capable of is something no other shinobi could even attempt, and that the Uzumaki boy's physical powers are far beyond that of a normal human, 2 is not a sufficient number to create a specific cell for them only. Not to mention that if you wanted a special ops group, we already have the Anbu for that," Homura remarked. "There is no dedicated task group of any type. What I want to do is form a group of people with varying degrees of influence, not simply for the good of the community, but also for their advantage," Hiruzen said. "We are dealing with people who have abilities that we, as ordinary shinobi, cannot duplicate, at least not properly. And the first thing that would spring to our thoughts when presented with such circumstance would be, how could we manage them? The answer is," Hiruzen paused before responding, "we can't, not quite. We could only accomplish so much by enforcing norms and standards, but there is anything more we could do, is to delegate authority to others. Of course, under supervision." "Are you implying that we allow the formation of a group of these different folks who are not directly involved with the government?" Homura was perplexed by what his old teammate was saying. "Have you gone insane, Hiruzen? The idea is ridiculous," Koharu said. "They, like any other organization, should be placed under Konoha's authority, not enabling them to be overseen without direct intervention from us. Let me ask you, my comrades," Hiruzen stated commandingly, "why are we allowed to govern the Anbu and any shinobi that we have in Konoha? Why can't the other cages and their councils do the same?" After a brief moment of quiet, Hiruzen said, "It's because we, like them, are shinobi. We are at the top because we are considerably more skillful, strong, and, at times, smarter than the majority of them. The difference between them and us is our level of authority, prowess, power, and experience, and we are authorized to control them as a result. But what distinguishes Naruto and the Anbu is that they are capable of doing things that even we cannot do, Hiruzen explained. She could very well defeat us in a fight despite our combat experience because of what she could see. Naruto could destroy this village if he, on a whim, wanted to do so because of his strength and speed. These folks are unique. And, in my opinion, we just do not have the right to reign over them. But directing them is a whole other story. And that is what I want to do. Hiruzen concluded, I do not intend to make them useful. I want to make them better than we are. Better than our trivial squabbles. Better than our paranoid suspicion. Better than our craving for power. I still believe in the inherent goodness of every person. And I want these people to be better than us, because if they are that much more capable and powerful than us, then they must have a much greater sense of responsibility, and if not, then we must teach them that. In essence, Koharu said, you didn't want to turn them into a spec ops team. You wanted to create a new community, a new clan. Yes, Hiruzen said, but to be more specific, I want to forge a unity. A day and a half later, the atmosphere in Konoha felt thick. Itachi had been meticulous and discreet in his performance. Everybody revealed that he had carried out a series of killings that caught almost everyone off guard. Others he had to murder in public were subsequently disposed of, together with others he had slain in their own houses. He had, as it was reported, been meticulous in his performance, as one would expect from a guy who can murder his whole family without blinking. The general population had been notified of what had occurred, though not of its origin, and who gave Itachi the commands, who gave him permission to do such a thing. Villain. Lunatic. Bastard with no heart. These were the phrases that someone who had seen the Uchiha massacre would use to describe Itachi right now. However, those who knew that Itachi was a complex person at best, and a vicious fanatic at worst, according to crucial facts of the incident under no scrutinizing eyes and ears, of course. Satsuki's point of view stood in the center. She was still having trouble understanding that her clan's numbers had been severely reduced, but the reality that it was her brother who did it was more difficult for her to accept. Her mother had done all she could to comfort her, but what she really needed was some time, and some breathing room, along with a much-needed gym session to burn off all the remaining sensations inside of her. So it should come as no surprise to find her alone at a training field, performing a variety of fighting moves that seemed to be very experienced. It was plausible to conclude that she had been there for quite some time based on the quantity of perspiration she had gathered, and it wasn't just sensible, it was the truth, she'd been there for many hours. And, given that the sun had only just risen, she hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. Just like the night following her clan's tragedy, the atrocity had occurred a day and a half before, and Satsuki had remained quiet the whole time. Her mother attempted to break her quiet in order to reconnect with her daughter, but after seeing that she had been mainly unresponsive, she decided to give her some more time. She quietly thanked God for that. Because of her, she really didn't know what to do or say to her just now. Though forgive was an overly hopeful term to describe her thoughts toward her mother, she had to realize that her mother had no control over what happened. Not after so many years of neither side seeking to find a peaceful settlement while continually at war with each other. Even though Satsuki had no direct emotional connection with the other member of her clan, losing so many individuals, some of whom she knew well, in the space of one night it's not simple to forget. But there was something more that disturbed her. Apart from her mother, the one person she wished to have by her side to at least attempt to console her was nowhere to be found after that awful night. Naruto. His absence was noted by her since he made no effort to see her after that tragic night, despite knowing why it occurred and how she would feel at the time. Granted, she had no reason to suspect he was avoiding her on purpose, but his absence was difficult for her. This added fire to Satsuki's desire to burn off the tension via physical activity. It was now 10:50 a.m. in the afternoon, and Satsuki could be spotted in a pretty deserted park, practicing her battle maneuvers well despite her lack of sleep and the little calories she had been consuming. She didn't feel the least bit tired. Even her senses were still acute. Her anxiousness did, however, significantly dilute her concentration. One minor drawback, nothing to write home about. At least, that's what she says. After all, she needed the diversion, so why should she complain? Still, it would be great if he could come to her any day of the week. Then, as if the universe had heard what she desired and intended to give her dream, she heard the sound of something approaching her. It's not the sound of footsteps. It was the sound of something landing after flying from where it took off to where she was now standing. Satsuki. That was his voice. She looked at him, hoping her face didn't show her emotions, but even she saw it was a false hope. Naruto. He was dressed in an orange and black short-sleeved t-shirt. He was dressed simply in a pair of blue pants and black shoes. He didn't seem to be hurt, but he did appear concerned about her. That infuriated her. If he was concerned, why didn't he pay her any attention yesterday? What may be preventing him from doing so? And what type of reasons had he planned to attempt to calm her down? "I'm sorry," was the first thing he said, "for not being there for you at all yesterday." Satsuki's rage subsided abruptly, but she retained it long enough to inquire, "Where were you?" Her tone of speech suggested that she desired. "No, it was necessary to know. The Hokage summoned me and my mother, and he said, things. A lot of things," Naruto said. "It has something to do with what we can do." "About that," Satsuki continued, "what is it that you have? Are you like me?" "You can say that. Well, if you're asking what I can do, then I'll say that I can do things that other people can't." Naruto grinned and nodded. "Then I guess we're similar in some ways," she commented, smiling slightly. The raven-haired girl then raised her right hand slightly and created a pulsating energy sphere that encircled her hand. "What would you call this, Naruto?" she inquired. "Energy projection," Naruto said almost instantly. "The old man told me that our power came from the difference in how our chakra manifests itself compared to shinobi's, and in my case, it comes with extreme physical augmentations, such as strength, speed, stamina, and so on." When she wanted to pursue her brother after Naruto distracted her for a few seconds, she recalled how swift he was. In that same period of time, he walked from the door to her front without any footsteps, but simply the sound of something moving so rapidly that it was merely a whistling wind. "While with you," Naruto began, completely unaware of her thoughts, "it's manifesting itself in some form of energy field, which could either destroy or protect, depending on what you want it to be." She muttered noncommittally as she examined her so-called energy field. "Say, Naruto." She began as she called off the energy field, reminded by something, "If our chakra manifests differently than shinobi's, is it possible that the methods they use to shape it into a jutsu would not be as efficient with us?" Naruto said, "It's possible. I mean, I can't even perform any of the basic jutsu properly." "Well, there's one thing that's apparent," Satsuki thought with a grin, knowing that her failure to execute a great fireball technique was not due to a physical defect of any type. But after a little quiet, Satsuki questioned, "So what did the Hokage show you?" recalling what had caused him to be unable to check on her for more than a day. "As I previously stated, it has something to do with us." Satsuki's brow twisted slightly. "Our abilities, that is." She deflated little. "It turns out that we may not be the only two people who have this kind of thing." "What?" she said. "You mean, there's more people like us out there?" "Yes, but the ones he knew for now were only one, not including us, and he would introduce her to us tomorrow, at 2 o'clock in his office," Naruto said. "More will come, I'm sure. That is, if you want to come." She was eager to arrive. "No, she had to come. I do want to." It was just yesterday that she assumed Naruto was similar to her, and it came out that the Hokage had something special in mind for the two of them. Various people are endowed with hitherto undiscovered abilities. She has a talent that few others have. Her clan had been wiped off. Her mother's religion had been contaminated, and it would take a long time to recover. But she will never again trust her as she used to. And her brother was not who she thought he was. She wanted to feel as though she belonged someplace. Naruto grinned and replied, "Great. I'll see you tomorrow then." He then added, "Unless you want me to accompany you today, to make up for yesterday?" "It would be fantastic." Satsuki had this thinking. "But, Naruto, I'll get over it. Sooner or later. With everything that's happened, I just want to be alone for a while," Satsuki moaned. "Before I came here, Satsuki," Naruto said, "my mother and I came to your house and met Makoto-san." "Oh. What did she say?" "She said you were avoiding her," Naruto remarked, his tone worried. "You didn't talk to her at all. You never made any eye contact, and you never once wanted to spend some time with her besides going out of your room to eat or go to the bathroom. She said she was trying to get you to open up, but your responses were either to ignore or refuse her outright. I know it's none of my business, Satsuki, but this won't help you cope with what happened," Naruto added. "Anyway," Naruto sighed, "when all was said and done, she told me to relay this message for you." I don't expect you to completely forgive me, but I'm more than willing to give it my all. Just give me a chance, please." When she heard it, Satsuki's lips quivered as if she was going to weep. "Don't push her away, Satsuki. It would be the worst thing you could do. To her, and to yourself," Naruto said. Satsuki nodded gently, almost imperceptibly, after more than a half-minute of stillness. "Okay." Naruto bowed and then added, "I'll give you some alone time, as you requested, and I'll see you tomorrow, Satsuki." He then walked away. He vanished instantly before her eyes, leaving only the faint sound of a gust of wind as evidence of his movement. She saw she wasn't as lively as she had been before he departed. Not because Naruto just stood up and left. She had asked to be left alone, and he was only obeying her wishes. But because of what he stated about her treatment of her mother. Pushing her away, refusing to accept her efforts to make apologies, remaining mute. She secretly agreed with Naruto. This was hardly the wisest thing she'd ever made, and that she needed to act now to prevent things from becoming worse before it was too late. "I need to put things right." Makoto Uchiha had received several condolences from her acquaintances and friends once they learned of what had occurred. "That breaks my heart. This must be challenging for you. I hope you're able to get through this. I wish you the best of luck." These remarks were repeated so many times by various persons that it was impossible for her to tell which were real and which were not. She appreciated the gestures, but because of what she knew, the activities had little emotional impact on her. All she felt about the slaughter was emotional numbness as a result of the enormous number of her people who had died. She, like Itachi, did not have a great deal of pride in her clan. Makoto, who had no consistent emotional tie to the so-called pride of the Uchiha, was one of the few who did not support the coup for the sake of devotion to her clan or honor. In fact, if she could be honest, she was strongly opposed to it. It was founded not out of logic, but out of obstinate pride and a desire for dominance. They would not make things better for the Uchiha, as Fugaku had promised her. They planned to transform Konoha into a dictatorship ruled entirely by the Uchiha. Two completely distinct objects that are only linked by the latter's ambiguity. She simply backed the coup since she was the coup leader's wife. Makoto used to adore Fugaku, or so she believed. However, after seeing the magnitude of his fixation with the coup's success and his overpowering pride in his clan, that attitude waned. Little by bit, till only apathy remained. While she came to dislike her husband's efforts in what he mistook for a quest to restore Uchiha's grandeur, she was more concerned about what the clan coup would do to her children. And she now understood what it did. Her kid was gone in both the metaphorical and literal senses of the term, and her kid was now viewing her from a whole new angle. Satsuki was aware that she was distancing herself away from her. Though she had tried to strike up a conversation, the tension in the air, as well as her lack of reaction whenever one occurred, had discouraged her from doing so. She believed she needed some time to process everything. She needed some distance and time to process all that had transpired. As a result, she decided to give it to her. A little amount of space and time. But while she sat in the living room of a home that only had her as a resident inside an empty area that was previously teeming with people while her daughter was elsewhere, avoiding her altogether, her willpower was eroding by the minute. She sat on the sofa and looked at the empty table in front of her. Her vacant stare showed that she was looking at nothing in particular and that her thoughts were elsewhere. Though Makoto had no doubt that telling her daughter the harsh, unpleasant reality about the situation was essential and proper rather than telling her a falsehood, she had a tiny sorrow. It had to be exposed sooner or later, she reasoned, hoping that Satsuki's early maturity would allow her to accept what had occurred. Makoto sighed deeply and told herself, she just needs some time, that's all. She wasn't convinced. After a few moments of silence, she turned to face the sound of a door opening. "Satsuki?" she yelled out, hoping that it was her daughter. Though there was no response, the sound of the door opening and closing indicated that someone had entered. Makoto felt relieved when the person she was hoping to meet entered the living room. She welcomed Makoto on the sofa with a stern, "Mom." Then there was an uneasy, tight quiet. From the outside, it was obvious that both of them wanted to speak to each other, to say anything to resolve the problem and stop the quiet. But there was a problem. The weighty mood generated by what had transpired had rendered them mute. There has to be something done. Someone has to make the initial move. Say the first sentence. That was all they needed to break the ice. Makoto was the first to do it. "Satsuki. I assume that Naruto has relayed my message." It wasn't a firm foundation, but it would have to suffice. Yes, Satsuki said. He did, she said. Then she looked her mother in the eyes and whispered, I don't know what to say, Mom. With what you've told me, I don't believe I'll ever be able to look at you the same way again. And thus we arrived to the root of the issue. I know you only wanted to do what was best for me. You care about my safety. That is something I am aware of. But after telling me what you did, or, more precisely, what you didn't do to prevent this from occurring in the first place. She began to stutter. Even though she didn't say anything else, it hurt Makoto more than any angry words she could have uttered. Makoto gathered all of her resolve and murmured, That's fair, Satsuki-chan. As you said, I could have stopped this from occurring years ago. And for that, I'll always bear the consequences. What may have been. What may have occurred if I had done something, and so on. But, what's done is done. Makoto said with finality and grief in her tone of voice. While I can't undo my past inaction, I don't want to lose you because of what I did. So whatever you want me to do, Satsuki, I will grant you, she said, her head bowed. Just give me an opportunity to earn your forgiveness, please. Her mother, Makoto, was pleading. I almost begged her not to leave her. And it was at this point that Satsuki had an epiphany. That she is not the only one who is struggling to cope with the atrocity. Her mother, in fact, may be having a more difficult time than she is. She knew some of the people her brother had slain, and as such, she would be more affected by their deaths than Satsuki, who only knew a few of them, not even as friends or close acquaintances. Add to it her remorse over her choice not to interfere in any manner before things went to ruin, and... Mom. Satsuki started by saying, I'm sorry. Makoto said, What are you apologizing for, Satsuki? After another interval of stillness that seemed more comfortable than the previous one. For being such a jerk to you. Satsuki explained. I can't see you like I used to, but you're still my mother, and I have no right to push you away in that manner. I just wasn't thinking clearly. I sincerely apologize. Makoto smiled slightly and replied, That's okay, Satsuki. That's okay, she answered, her voice full of relief. They embraced after that. As neither side needed to say anything else, Makoto was mistaken about Satsuki's feelings for her. She was correct in that all she needed was time. Even though the link between them had been badly destroyed, it remained. She hopes that with time and work, she would be able to repair what was lost between them. No, she must. Makoto grabbed her daughter even harder and closer as tears welled up in her eyes. She vowed to herself that she would cherish what remained of her family and kin. Satsuki had now become her whole world. She would go to tremendous measures to secure her safety. Itachi Uchiha quickly became the most visible example of a traitor known to the Konoha and certain areas of the 5 great shinobi countries. His name had gone down in history as an unrepentant, extraordinarily adept mass murderer who had slaughtered practically every member of his tribe. As a result, he became a wanted criminal, pursued by anyone seeking a challenge or the high reward set on his head as a Konoha nuke nin. Itachi, on the other hand, excelled at concealing. Along with his ability to blend among crowds and employ henge to disguise himself. Itachi was quite content to live on the run. Given what he had done, whether on orders or not, he knew how he had committed an atrocious act, and as such, having his citizenship revoked by his own village, known as the Black Sheep who murdered his entire clan out of sheer spite or just because he could, and living without a proper roof over his head for an indefinite amount of time was quite a fair exchange. Such sacrifices must be made in order to stabilize the community and maintain the elemental nations at peace. However, Satsuki and her mother escaped the slaughter. It was not presented as a sorrow, which he should have resolved. Instead, it was delivered as a comment tinged with relief and optimism. His sibling and mother were not killed. They were the members of the clan Uchiha and his family who were not afflicted by the mental illness that had plagued the Uchiha clan for centuries. 2 out of hundreds may not be a fair deal, but it was not his choice, and it had already been determined. No need to linger on what might have been, he told himself as he walked down a man-made route surrounded by woodlands, disguised as an ordinary merchant by a henge. Better to concentrate on what is before my journey. Itachi was reminded of what his sister had said him while he was thinking about the future, and what about her condition? His sister had done an excellent job of concealing her talent. He had to confess that he was astonished to find her with a comparable skill to his. Knowing his sister's tenacity, his need to show his regret may drive her to pursue him wherever he went. That's why he told her she needed to become stronger before fighting him again. She was merely a headstrong youngster who hadn't reached her full potential as of yet. However, given enough time, she may be able to beat him in fair fight. Perhaps it was simply a silly idea. Maybe he was simply playing on his sister's need to see him express regret. Or maybe he wanted her to succeed, to be able to drive his feelings to the surface using any methods required. Whatever the cause, if Satsuki ever crossed his path again, it would be a struggle, that much was clear. However, for the time being, Itachi raised his gaze to the heavens. He was now far from Konoha and nowhere near any form of village. After hiding for more than a day, might he employ a mode of transportation other than walking, jogging, or shunshin? He focused and concentrated, closing his eyes yet never turning his head down and still viewing the sky. As a result, the paper-thin crimson energy field that enveloped his body was created. He felt his feet leave the earth a few moments later. Itachi launched up into the sky, smiling to himself, pleased that his basic impulses had been stirred by something no regular person could do without the use of external methods. He left a path of fiery energy in his wake. The end of a difficult childhood. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast and for listening to the video. I hope you did enjoy the part of the story, and if you did, like, share and subscribe for more, and thank you all for happy support and have a great day.